Thank you for joining, everyone. Looks like we have a majority of people on the line. So we'll kick off the content. We'll go through some housekeeping items at first to make sure everyone's on the same page. And then we will get right into the content. So I'll introduce both Ari Paparo and David Dohan of TruSignal, allow them to give a brief introduction of who they are and their companies, and then I'll briefly talk about some housekeeping items before we get into the content, which will be kicked off and set the stage by Ari, and then David will go right into TruSignal and their predictive score marketing technology. So Ari, go right ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi everybody, I'm Ari Paparo, the CEO and founder of Beeswax, a longtime ad tech person. Really happy to be here. Beeswax enables sophisticated marketers and media companies to have their own bidder in the cloud. We call it the Bidder-as-a-Service. And I'm really excited to talk about our partnership with TruSignal and what you can do with these two great technologies.
I'm sorry, and David, go right ahead and introduce yourself and TruSignal.
Sure. Hi, this is David Dohan. I'm the founder and CEO of TruSignal. And TruSignal, we're a predictive analytics and data company. So we use tremendous amounts of offline data to help marketers do three things. One, get insights about their existing customers. Two, help you do lookalike targeting. And three, what we're going to talk about today is how do you use offline data and predictive scores to make much more intelligent bids by leveraging data at the individual level. So that's kind of the three things we do.
Thanks, David. So just so everyone's aware, the webinar is being recorded and will be sent out to everybody who registered for the webinar within 48 hours once we do a little bit of editing. If you have any questions about Beeswax, TruSignal, or the Programmatic Cloud, which is the partnership between Beeswax and TruSignal, at the end we'll give you contact information for Ari and David, as well as information on how to access additional documentation about Beeswax, TruSignal, and the Programmatic Cloud. You can also email Julia at beeswax.com if you have any additional questions that aren't addressed on this webinar. So we'll kick it right off with Ari as he sets the stage about what we'll be talking about today.
Great. Well, so the nature of this partnership between Beeswax and TruSignal is around what we call our Programmatic Cloud offering. So Beeswax was built with the most extensible APIs and technology available in the RTB market, and many of our customers have chosen to extend our solution with their own code, their own optimization, et cetera. The Programmatic Cloud allows us to bring to the table the best of breed solutions in the market to let customers take advantage of the Beeswax platform without necessarily writing any of their own, getting the value add that a deep partnership can offer. So with that said, I want to kind of dive into what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to try to make this educational, not a sales pitch. We're going to talk a bit about our experiences in the market and what makes sense to some of the listeners on the webinar. So in general, when we talk to marketers and advanced media companies about how they approach programmatic, data is the key. And a data-driven approach applies not just to the obvious things like optimization, but it's really the complete solution is data-driven. So looking at supply and making very intelligent decisions about what supply needs to be provisioned for a given bidding instance. Looking at the audience and your user data, which is a very common thing for people to look at, to say, well, how do we get more out of this data and sort of de-average it? And that's a lot of what this TruSignal relationship is about de-averaging the data. And then finally, the headline, which is optimization, and talking about how do you get more out of the opportunities to bid on given inventory in a programmatic environment. So those are kind of all the questions that people should be asking when they're trying to design a bidding and a programmatic solutions. How using data to understand what supply to listen to, what data to bring to the table, and how to optimize it. Now today, we're talking primarily about the middle section, the data and optimization layer, where we're going to talk about the TruSignal scoring approach, which is really unique in the market, but how they score consumers. And then we're going to talk about how Beeswax is opening up new technology, bid modification technology that allows those scores to be used in real time. So that's really the bulk of the presentation that we'll go through. So that said, let me hand it over to David to talk about the solution TruSignal is bringing to the table.
Great, thank you. So before we get into details about kind of bidding and bidding modifications, I wanted to give a little background about predictive scoring. Probably the most common example of a predictive score, one that probably most of us are familiar with, is a credit score. Back up there for a second. So a credit score, again, as you're probably aware, is the credit company's way of kind of understanding how you will use credit in the future based upon historical use of credit. And so what they do is they look at your past uses of credit, and then they make a prediction about how you're going to be using credit into the future. It's a good example of how you can use data you know about someone today to make predictions into the future. And so we don't, of course, use credit scoring when it comes to marketing, but the same example applies, right? There's a tremendous amount of information you can know about someone today, and in a marketing context, we can create a predictive score that will make a prediction about how someone is likely or unlikely to convert for a specific offer. And so that's really the technique that we apply, is this predictive scoring technique. And so the slide that you're looking at now really gives you another illustration of predictive scoring. So in the middle there, we have information about a typical segment-based view. So let's say you're trying to target someone between the ages of 25 to 35, income 70,000, college-educated female. That's a pretty typical kind of requirement for a segment-based view of the world. What's interesting about segments, of course, is they're really binary. You're either in the segment, you meet all the criteria, or you're out of the segment. So that's a very kind of in or out view of the world. What's interesting about predictive scoring is it tends to find many different shades of gray. So instead of viewing the world as yes target or no target, a predictive score looks at literally thousands of different attributes and weighs those attributes according to how important that attribute is in predicting someone to be a really good target, or really, a really good member of the target segment. So on the left, you'll see Michelle over there. She meets the criteria. She's in the age, education, income, and gender, but she has many different other facets that make her a much more likely target, a much more viable target. And Rachel on the right, again, she meets the criteria of the segment, but she has several other facets that make her less interesting from a targeting perspective. And so what the predictive score model does is it actually looks at all of these many different attributes, and it comes up with an index from 0 to 99. 99 is the best, and 0 is the worst, and everywhere in between. So instead of saying, Michelle or Rachel are good or bad, it really kind of creates these shades of gray. And this is all based upon machine learning. So it looks at the historical conversion data of customers and compares the attributes of Michelle and Rachel and kind of ranks everyone in the US population. So instead of saying yes target, no target, the solution for predictive scoring actually creates all of these shades of gray. And you'll see in a second that has important implications for a bidder. So the solution we're talking about today, really, it's not really a targeting solution. What it does is it gives you better information to inform your campaigns in terms of what's the right price to bid. And so we'll talk about that in a second. You go to the next slide. So the scores are created, like I said, through a machine learning process, and it actually uses a tremendous amount of offline data. So when we looked at the market, one of the challenges that we saw out there is a lot of information about online activity, time of day, day, week, exchange, maybe someone's browser type. People are incorporating that information fairly regularly to make decisions about, who to target and the right price to pay. One of the missing data points out there was really using tremendous amounts of offline data. So when we approached the problem, we looked at offline data in various categories, ranging from business information, demographics, past purchase information, property records, hobbies, lifestyles, etc., to create the scores. So there's a tremendous amount of offline data that's incorporated into each predictive score that can be used for online and online pricing. Next slide, please. So in a second, we're going to explore with Beeswax exactly how you can use these predictive scores that essentially rank everyone in the US from 0 to 99. How can you use that to actually be smarter in terms of your bidding strategy? And in some of the early pilots that we've done, incorporating a score into your bidding algorithm, we've actually demonstrated a pretty significant improvement in terms of the action rate for some of the branding campaigns by 65%. And we've also seen decreases by 34% just by bidding smarter. So I'll turn back over to Ari to talk a little more about the different options for programmatic optimization.
Great, thanks, David. Fascinating overview. Great, thanks, David. Sorry, I was on mute. So now I want to talk a little bit about operationalizing some of this data and how it works in general, according to any DSP, but specifically we'll speak to the Beeswax solution. So there's a range of ways you can optimize in different DSPs. There's out-of-the-box optimization where many DSPs have algorithms they've developed over the years that try to produce CPI or CPA results. The new thing that Beeswax is introducing here is bid modifiers. So bid modifiers is a technique that is, we didn't invent it, but we're implementing it in our DSP, really announcing it today as part of this conversation, that allow sophisticated buyers to control the bidding and the algorithm according to many rules and many data sets. And that gives customers the ability to very efficiently and effectively produce results. Now, I wouldn't be fair if I didn't mention the fact that custom optimization, or sometimes called BYOA, or bring your own algorithm, is one of the core tenets of the Beeswax solution. We're really the only DSP in the market that can offer the range of all three of these options with sort of a crawl, walk, run approach. So what we're going to talk about for the next couple of slides is our bid modification product, which is in beta currently and is deeply integrated to TruSignal and gives a lot of capabilities to our customers that they haven't had previously. So bid modifiers are kind of the sweet spot for many customers or many marketers. It gives the customer the ability to really customize at the line item level how to bid on given auctions at a pretty detailed level. So effectively anything that's available in targeting and implementing user scoring. It's very efficient because it is a workflow solution, a trafficking workflow solution. It doesn't require engineering to implement. And it also reduces the needs of ad ops because it reduces the proliferation of line items and other objects. And it produces great results. So just at the granular level, it's very easy to see how turning the knobs on your bidding using a bid modification technology can produce higher results. So just a little more detail on each of those things. So first of all, bid modification, it allows you to refine your bids on targeting criteria and other values. So to use an example, if you're finding that the results on your campaign are affected by the browser, you can use bid modification to increase the bid on Chrome, reduce the bid on Safari, and increase the bid during daylight hours, reduce it at night. Without bid modification, you either have to write an algorithm to do that, or you have to have multiple objects, multiple line items or campaigns in your system. Then you have to figure out how budget is shared across those, and it turns into an ad ops nightmare. The bid modification lets you get the best bang for your buck with very little work. So the ad ops, I mentioned this already, but you may in some systems have a situation where you find your ad ops people having hundreds of line items to achieve one goal, and bid modification really reduces the need for that or eliminates it. And lastly, results. So it's all about getting the results and being able to make these intelligent bidding strategies in a very straightforward way, produces better results, and gives you the learning that you may want if you choose over time to bring your own algorithm and to write your own algorithm in the Beeswax system. So overall, bid modification is a big step forward. Like I said, we're in beta with it right now, and we'll be doing a full webinar and training in the coming weeks for our existing customers.
Before we get into how these two systems work together, I just want to remind everyone that there's a Q&A section that you are encouraged to ask questions to both the panelists, and we will address them at the end of the webinar. I'm going to let Ari get right into the partnership where Ari and David will talk about the joint arrangement we have.
Absolutely. So David talked about how TruSignal scores every U.S. household. I've been talking a bit about bid modification, so let's bring the chocolate and peanut butter together. So effectively, what we're talking about here is, if you read from the right, you have all these online signals that I think David mentioned earlier, that are available in bid requests, easily retrieved from the reporting in the DSP, and they can be used to develop a base bid. And that's kind of par for the course, that your ad ops folks or your analysts are trying to figure out how to bid efficiently using historical data. But now what we're able to do with the combination of bid modifiers and our TruSignal partnership is bring that detailed true audience score, that 0 to 99, and apply it at the user level. So individual cookies and mobile advertising IDs can now be scored by TruSignal on that scale, specifically for each customer's needs. And that score can be used directly inside the Beeswax system to multiply the bid and to produce a optimized scale of bids from 0 for customers who don't have value according to that score, to a higher bid that assures more delivery for the most valuable customers. So effectively, we're moving from an area of Boolean, yes, no, high value, low value users to a de-averaged range where every single user is scored according to their needs. And that directly feeds into the bidding in the Beeswax system without any real technology requirements on behalf of our customers.
Yeah, and Ari, if I could just add, one of the things that I think that's really compelling and interesting is you can actually take a lot of the core learnings that you have today from the online data you've been using to construct your algorithms, and applying the score actually doesn't replace what you're doing. It really just supplements it and really turbocharges it. It adds much more additional information to be smarter in terms of the bidding. So it doesn't replace any of the targeting you're doing, and it doesn't replace, your current base bid constructs. It really kind of supplements it. And so this is, like we talk about, the best of the online data that you're using today, and then add the best of the offline data from TruSignal. That's really the winning combination.
Absolutely.
And David, I'll let you get right into this slide as well.
Sure. So this talks a little bit about the process. And so again, the way that we create one of these, bid price optimization data grids is we start out with an example of best customers. So that can be a Beeswax conversion ID. So the TruSignal natively reads Beeswax IDs. It can be hashed emails. It can be mobile ad IDs. It can be an import from a LiveRamp if you're housing your data at LiveRamp or any of the DMPs. But you start out with a sample of some of your best customers, right? And this is to train the model. So that information then is analyzed. We'll append 3,000 or so attributes against every single record, run a massive machine learning algorithm, and we'll figure out all of those different data points that make a difference. So every single audience or every single campaign is customized to the specific people that you're trying to reach. Just like we saw with Michelle and Rachel on the earlier slide, right? It's not just about a couple data points. It's going to factor in literally hundreds of data points to come up with that unique algorithm. Once that algorithm is discovered, it then runs the predictive scoring. And so we're going to go through every single person in the US and give them that score 0 to 99 based upon what the machine learned about, the attributes of the best and the worst converting users, 0 to 99. So that's the second step. And then thirdly, that information is transferred over to your Beeswax account. And in addition, you'll also get kind of recommended bid multipliers for every score. So the top scorers, right, you're going to have an increase in your bid multiplier. In this example, I think we're showing 3.67 for the top scores. That's your bid multiplier, so you bid those up. And then if people have a low score, the recommendation is to bid those people down, right? And again, as a reminder, it's not an absolute value. We're not saying, hey, bid $3.67. What we're saying is, given everything else this person is more likely to convert, and you should probably consider upping your bid by a multiplier, right? So it's all relative to the other information you have from the online behavioral. That's the third step. And then fourth, again, it's important to test. So Beeswax has capability to set up A/B split control testing, so you can kind of measure the performance, the incremental lift that you achieve by applying these bid modifiers.
So the availability of this product. So one of the benefits of our Programmatic Cloud partnerships is we take away the complexity of contracts and payments. So for existing Beeswax customers, this can flow directly through their existing MSAs. And the fee is 60 cents CPM, which we pass through without any marked up, so fully transparent and wholesale kind of relationship. Available really shortly. So as I mentioned, the bid modifier product is currently being rolled out, expected to be fully available within about 2 weeks. And for existing customers, we'd encourage you to contact your account manager to find out how to be enabled for it and to get additional information, both about bid modifiers and about the TruSignal relationship. For those thinking about learning more about Beeswax, we'd be happy to talk about this, as I'm sure David would as well, to get an idea of how we can apply this to an individual business.
Great, and we will get right into Q&A. We do have some in queue right now. We also have Ari and David's information here. Should you want to email them directly, access more information on either Beeswax or TruSignal. So we will get right into the questions. One of the questions is, I only work in mobile. Does this work with mobile clients? Ari, we'll start with you, and then David will get right over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So Beeswax was built from the start with mobile in mind. So we treat mobile identifiers and mobile targeting as equal parties with anything desktop, and I believe TruSignal feels the same way.
Absolutely. It's all people-based, right? And so we translate from people into specific mobile identifiers associated with those people. So it works extremely well in mobile.
Great. So another question is, I already use optimization and advanced algorithms. I'd like to know how the TruSignal data and the Beeswax bid multiplier works with already existing optimization models. David, we'll start with you.
Sure. So I guess maybe to learn a little bit about the optimization model, it sounds like, just a clarifying question, is this a custom algorithm, kind of a BYOA that you have created?
Yes.
Yes, it is. Okay, so they have a BYO algorithm. So in the you might be a great candidate for the third, the more advanced use case, right? So Ari talked about kind of basic optimization, bid modification, and then kind of BYOA. So in the BYOA context, the recommendation would be to, instead of treating the 0 to 99 score as a multiplier, really treat it as an input to your custom algorithm. So we do have some clients that are ingesting the raw scores and then using that as predictive material for their own custom algorithm. So if you're running kind of machine learning yourself, the recommendation would be to ingest the raw scores and factor that into your equation when you're doing the final calculation. So it's a more advanced implementation, but if you're doing BYOA, you're probably already there from an advanced implementation.
Yeah, and also we build this technology so that if there are multipliers in place with a custom algorithm, we pass through the multiplied value so that your algorithm is free to use that however it chooses.
More business-related question for you, David. Anything incoming for non-US markets?
No, unfortunately not. Our data is really US based, and with GDRP coming up and all that, there's obviously a lot of noise in the industry about this. So we are strictly US based.
I will point out the bid modification product on its own from Beeswax is a global product.
Hi, Tom Triscari from Labmatic. How are you? So this is a longer question. We do have some time, which is nice. Labmatic, it looks at bid multipliers as a class of expected value bidding, where the bid price equals a known value times the probability of achieving the targeting objective. The known value is the price one would be willing to pay in absence of competition. What do you recommend to estimate the known value or base bid price? Where do you start?
Well, one approach is to make the base bid $1 and effectively use the multiplier as the bid, so that you kind of have an easy to understand base, but you never actually plan on bidding the base. I've seen people do that. Another approach is to set the base quite low and then use multipliers sort of aggressively to bid upwards. I don't think there's one scientific approach to how to do it. I think that you kind of have to use some trial and error based on the complexities of the bid landscape.
David, question for you. What data sources is TruSignal using to establish its segment matching?
So we use 12 classes of data, really. And so they come from, it's predominantly kind of offline data. And so that comes from demographics is one big class. We license data from the major demographic providers. Past purchase behavior, so who's bought what online and offline, down to the SKU level. We have hobbies and interests. So the kinds of websites people go to, magazine subscriptions, life stage, property records. We have business records, as well as information about investment profiles, things like that. Census data. So it's a pretty broad, wide data set covering a lot of different aspects that we use as kind of the foundational predictive content. I think that was the question. Unless you're asking a question about matching, I want to make sure I'm answering the right question.
I think that was it. Gokhan, thanks for the question. I think we addressed a lot of these, but when will the bid multiplier be online and can be used by buyers?
Yeah, so we're in beta right now. If you'd like your account to be enabled for beta, reach out to your account manager, or if you don't know who that is, you can just send me an email at ari@beeswax.com. There's no additional cost. And in terms of granularity, we're enabling, like we talked about in this presentation, user level. So individual users on an individual segment basis can have a modification. In terms of targeting, it's effectively any targeting criteria. So everything from browser, time of day, geography, et cetera. Essentially anything that's in the UI as a targeting criteria will be enabled to be modified.
Great. Kunal has a question for you, David. If we were to share additional data on a mobile device ID level, can that be utilized to further refine the scoring model?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the, that's one of the ways that the seed file is captured is to import device ID. So if you have a custom data set, something special about the mobile device IDs, that can absolutely be incorporated into the overall algorithm. And that's a good approach, right? Because then you're getting the best of kind of your first party data plus the best of the third party data combined. So absolutely.
Great. And David, it looks like we have another question for you. What are your typical match rates against a typical audience? Say I have 30,000 customers, how many will match on X number of variables?
So a lot of it depends upon the nature of the match, kind of how the data comes in. We match, from a PII perspective, about 99% of US adults. So we'll recognize on an incoming seed file just about every single person. When you get to emails, that number drops to around 40%, mobile IDs around 40% from an incoming match perspective. So it depends upon the match key. The same is true if you send, a file from a DSP and it's their kind of ID. Again, we'll match about a 40%. But again, we use that really from a sampling perspective, so you can get very effective models even if you don't have a 100% match on the incoming data.
Great. Well, David, we thank you so much for joining this webinar with us. It looks like we've concluded. And we've gotten through majority of the questions here. Other more specific questions we'll answer on a one-to-one basis. I'll leave this slide up for a few more seconds. If anybody has any additional questions for Beeswax, feel free to email ari@beeswax.com or David at david.dohan@tru-signal.com. So David, thanks again for joining us today. It was really insightful. I will be sending out a recorded version of the webinar to everyone who registered within the next 48 hours.